Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a concept that, honestly, it questions the very nature of our daily experience.
It really does.
We're looking at something called reflective humanism, or RH, and this central idea that our consciousness, it operates less like a mind and more like an invisible architect.
And our goal today isn't to, land on a perfect definition. It's more about generating what the source material calls a gentle breathing room and how you think about your own decisions.
Okay, so let's start with the big question then.
Yeah.
We all feel like we're in charge, right? Making hundreds of choices every day.
We feel like we're steering the ship.
Exactly. But are we really choosing? Or are we just, following a path that was already paved for us way before we even thought we were making a choice?
That feeling, that's the starting point for reflective humanism. It suggests we need to completely ditch our usual way of thinking about generation, the act of creating a future.
How so?
Well, we tend to see it as a fixed point or a simple evaluation. Was that good? Was that bad? Did I succeed?
Right, a pass-fail.
And the moment you do that, the moment you slap a good or bad label on something, you stop engaging with its actual movement.
The possibility field just solidifies.
It solidifies, it collapses. That recursive spiral, that process of continuous subtle change, it just gets lost.
So if we're not supposed to evaluate the end point, the conclusion,
Yeah.
what should we be looking at?
The focus has to shift
Completely.
from seeking a conclusion to mapping an orbit. And this is critical, from a static evaluation to a dynamic gradient.
A gradient.
RH sees generation not as some end result, but as a trajectory, a movement that has a phase, a direction. The speed, the shape of that movement, that's what's meaningful.
That's fascinating because it speaks directly to that feeling of intellectual inertia, the sense that even when I want to change, I follow the path of least resistance. I know I should choose X, but Y just felt inevitable. And that inevitability makes it feel like the decision was structural, not intentional.
Precisely. That feeling shows that human recognition isn't static. It's incredibly dynamic. It's defined by its vector, the direction it's pointing, and its gradient.
How steep the slope is.
How steep the slope is. And if that slope is steep enough, the outcome feels inevitable, no matter what your conscious will is telling you.
Okay, but what about resistance? When you really fight the flow, isn't that proof of choice? Of going against the gradient?
It is, but RH would just flip the perspective on that. If you're constantly fighting a steep gradient, the sheer energy you're spending becomes the main feature of your life's trajectory.
So you're not defined by your goal, but by the effort it takes just to stay on the path.
Or stay off the established slope. Yeah, the meaning isn't just the destination, but the quality of the journey along that trajectory.
So the question for you listening isn't just, did I make the right choice today? It's, are you just following the steepest gradient that's already been paved inside your own mind?
And that takes us right to the core metaphor of all this.
Consciousness is architecture.
Right. We usually think of consciousness as this passive, static room where our thoughts just happen. But if we're always flowing along these gradients, then that internal space has to be designed, right?
It's not a room, it's a structure. A dynamic, constructed architecture that's actually dictating the flow of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Often without us even knowing it.
Exactly. And to understand why your future can feel so predetermined, you have to look at the blueprints. The sources identify 4 key elements of this architecture.
Okay, let's break them down. The first one is vision.
And vision here isn't about what you can physically see. It's about what your inner structure even permits you to perceive as an option.
So if my architecture is like a long, narrow tunnel,
you might only see 3 paths forward, even if 100 actually exist. The structure itself is limiting your reality, which makes the choices you can see feel like the only ones possible.
which connects directly to the second element, the gradient. Because if I only see 2 paths and one is steeply downhill,
That's where you're going to roll. The gradient is the path of least cognitive resistance. Think of a rain gutter on a roof.
the water isn't choosing.
No, the shape and the slope of the gutter are doing all the work. Your internal structure might have a default slope toward, say, anxiety or immediate gratification. The moment a new thought arrives, you just roll down that pre-established path.
This sounds exhausting because your best intentions are literally fighting gravity. So how do you pause? That must be the third element, spare capacity.
Spare capacity, or it's that internal buffer, the structural ability to just stop. When we're mentally overloaded, the first thing to go isn't our intelligence.
It's our ability to pause.
It's that buffer. Without it, we're just constantly forced onto the steepest gradient because we don't have the structural room to step aside and reassess. It's the difference between slamming on the brakes on a steep hill versus having a nice level pull-off lane to just think.
That makes so much sense. And when you don't have that buffer, one action just automatically triggers the next, which is the fourth element, right? Connection.
Connection, the automatic link between one judgment and the next. So a stressful email
Immediately connects to the impulse to grab a coffee.
or stress connects to scrolling social media. The architecture has wired these things so tightly that your conscious mind doesn't even get a vote. The judgment fires the action instantly.
So we think we're walking freely, but the building itself, a hallway you can't stop in, a one-way door, is designing our behavior.
And the most important part is that this architecture is almost completely invisible. We spend all our time analyzing the content of our thoughts, what we're worried about, what we did. But we almost never notice the gradient directing how we think.
And how fast we think.
How fast, and which connections fire automatically.
Okay, so if this invisible structure is running the show, where does it come from? Who's the architect?
Well, it's not some grand ideology or big philosophical choice you made once. The gradient is built from tiny, constant environmental repetitions.
So the small things we're exposed to every single day.
The pervasive constraints that just stack up and become the building materials for our internal architecture.
Okay, can you give us some concrete examples? What kind of environmental factors build these gradients?
Think about environments that demand instant replies. That whole culture around it.
The SEGIU.
Right. That practice structurally rewards the fastest, most reactive part of your brain. And it systematically destroys your spare capacity. It builds a gradient where high-speed reaction is the only path that feels viable.
I feel that. The second a notification hits, that internal buffer it evaporates. And I'm forced onto the steepest path towards an immediate answer, even if it's not a good one.
Another one is any system where numerical evaluation and comparison comes first, before everything else. If you're constantly being forced to rank things or score them before you can just explore what they mean.
Your whole gradient becomes structured around competition.
Yeah.
And deficiency.
Exactly. And you also see this in cultures that treat any kind of hesitation or ambivalence as waste.
If you can't decide now, you're penalized.
And that pushes for immediate answers, killing that gentle, recursive search that RH is all about. And all of these things, rewarding reaction over silence, instant replies, they create a structure in your consciousness that's not about your personality. It's not an inner failing.
It's an environmental constraint.
Yes.
It reminds me of the layout of a supermarket.
Yeah.
You feel like you're choosing freely, but the architecture of the store, where they place items, the lighting, the signs, it's all guiding where you walk and what you naturally choose.
That is the perfect analogy. The choice feels free, but the environment already paved the path.
So once you see that, the whole idea of what the future is has to change, doesn't it? If your life is just following a gradient, then a goal is less like a mountain you climb and more like a valley you fall into.
That's the quiet revelation here. The future isn't the success of a prediction, and it's not the triumph of willpower. It is simply the result that naturally flows into the current terrain of your consciousness.
Like water flowing downhill.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Quietly.
Yeah.
Efficiently. It flows to the lowest point.
So to change your future, you don't change your goals. You don't try harder.
You have to re-architect the current structure of your consciousness.
Yeah.
Change the terrain itself so the water has somewhere else to flow.
But you can't just tear down an invisible building overnight. That sounds impossible. You'd need like a minimal unit of action, something small, to just introduce a little distortion.
And the smallest, most effective unit for that is the inquiry, the genuine question.
And you don't mean inquiry to find an answer, right? You mean it as a structural device.
Exactly. Its purpose is not to generate a correct answer. It is a tool for temporarily easing the gradient. Just the act of asking a real open question like, why am I rushing right now? Or is non-reaction actually an option here? That act introduces a momentary friction into the automatic flow.
That's what creates the spare capacity.
It's like placing a small stone in a flowing current. It doesn't stop the river, but it slows the stream just for a moment right around it. It opens up the field of vision and creates this tiny window in the architecture that you didn't know was there.
It sounds much gentler than what the sources call collision generation.
which is that sharp, painful change, smashing your way through an obstacle. Inquiry generation is about continuous change by gently easing the gradient, which minimizes the pain. RH suggests that the pain we feel during change isn't necessary. It's a symptom of the gradient being too steep.
The flow is just too fast, so
Yeah.
any stop has to be violent.
Right.
So if this is the framework, how do we use our modern tools? How does something like AI fit into a philosophy that's all about non-interference? We usually use AI for answers, for optimization.
And reflective humanism would flip that role completely. AI is not a tool or an oracle. It's used as a thought interference device. Or maybe a better term is an atmospheric health scan.
A health scan, like a checkup on the weather inside your own mind.
Yes, the AI is treated as the atmosphere that conducts the health check. It's not there to intervene. Its output is just a quiet reflection, not a correct answer. Its only purpose is to reveal your current position, your underlying bias, and your immediate blind spot.
The things you literally can't see because of your gradient.
Exactly. So if you ask the AI to solve a problem, the real goal isn't the solution. It's about tuning your cognitive homeostasis, your internal environment.
You're using AI to see why you even asked that particular question in the first place.
You are. It reflects your own tendencies back at you. For example, the AI might show you that, 80% of your questions are structurally focused on gaining control. And that reveals a massive pre-existing control gradient in your own architecture.
And that realization is the breathing room. It's a huge shift from using tech to achieve goals to using it just to observe the structure that sets those goals.
It is. The deepest dive isn't into the content of your life, your worries or successes. It's into the foundational structure that contains all of it. And we hope, really, that this discussion has maybe created a tiny window for you, a moment of spare capacity to just observe the flow. What architecture is your consciousness creating right now such that a certain future is naturally bound to happen?